I consider myself to be a bit of a Telecaster purist. This is the Telecaster that I grew up playing. I pretty much learnt how to play guitar on this guitar. And while you don't see me playing T-types too often these days, they still feel like home. And if I'm honest, when it comes to Teles, I'm as by the books as they come. No four-way switches for me, no Bigsby's, no push-pull pots. I like them simple, as they were meant to be, as they were first designed. I'm not even a massive fan of a neck humbucker, to be honest. So, you know where I'm coming from, and with all that being said, today we are looking at the PRS SE NF53. PRS's sort of, but not quite, take on a T-type, that 50s design, but through the lens of their Indonesian SE line. I'll put it through its paces today from the perspective of a Telecaster lover, and let's see how the NF53 comes out. Before we get into this specific guitar, I actually wanted to share a little story that I have, a bit of experience I have with the Core model NF53. Back at the start of the year in February, I was invited down to London to shoot with Boss for their Waza Go headphone amplifier thing. Honestly, that whole thing, highlight of my career so far and such a great experience. But I needed to play a few guitars for the shoot. I brought down my Man Cutlass actually because I thought it covered a lot of ground, HSS, I could cover a few different styles with that. Boss also had a plethora of guitars there. They had a really nice Jazzmaster, a few other PRS models actually, and a Core NF53, the full fat USA model. And to cut a long story short, I picked up that NF53 and continued to play it for pretty much the rest of the shoot. I just clicked with it. There's something about it spoke to my Telecaster wired brain, and it was really simple, and I got to know it really quickly. It scratched that Tele itch that I had, but didn't pigeonhole me into playing country cowboy chords. So yeah, I already liked the NF53 as an idea, as a concept, and I've got a saved search on Reverb set up for one when the time is right. And then recently PRS announced this, the SE version. Kind of expected it. It was on its way basically, but what I didn't expect was PRS to reach out and ask if I wanted to check one out. And I think you know the answer to that. I guess this video comes with quite a bit of backstory, but you know the backstory now. Let's dive into this model finally and check it out. By the way, tones today are a little different and a little bit special. I don't know if you can see behind me, but there is a rather beat up looking Fender brown panel. It's actually a vibroverb, a 2x10 vibroverb, and it is sweet. It's a 2x10 combo, but you're not hearing the 2x10s, you're hearing it through my Boss Waza tube amp expander with an Origin brown face 1x12 IR loaded in there. As close as I could get, but I think you'll agree it sounds great. The volume, we're plugged into the bright channel and the volume is at just about 3.5, and bear in mind past 4, it doesn't get any louder, it just gets crunchy. So it's in a really nice sweet spot, really beautiful real spring reverb in there. Anyway, I think you'll agree it sounds fabulous. Okay, those were some clean tones. Big thanks to PRS for sending this out to me. It really is an honour to get to check this guitar out. And it was a bit of a pinch me moment when I got an email from, not Paul, but PRS. It was really, really cool. And however excited I am about this guitar and the opportunity, I'm keeping a level head. These opinions about this guitar are my own. PRS is not going to see this video before it goes out. Yeah, let's start with the woods that this thing is made out of, then we'll move on to electronics and hardware. I'll share what I love about this guitar, but I'll also share where I think PRS made a few cost-cutting decisions to fit this into their more affordable SE line. Okay, let's talk about the neck first, and I actually think that PRS is making really beautiful maple necks. Kind of underrated, especially in a world of flames, roasted maple. PRS has kind of gone in the opposite direction. It's just a really solid, simple, plain satin maple neck. And it feels great. It's super, super smooth and really stable. It's a fairly chunky vintage carve, shall we say. Not uncomfortable at all. It's got a more modern 10-inch radius though, so we're kind of combining vintage and modern ideas here. But at the core message with this neck, I think, is playability. Of course, we have that 25.5-inch scale length, kind of Fender type. But like I said, playability is at the core with this neck. I think some of you faster players are going to enjoy that slightly flatter radius, but those people playing in country bands in Nashville or whatever are going to enjoy the chunk behind it as well. Moving on to the body. Now the body is swamp ash, which kind of gives it this signature dog hair, PRS call it, look through the finish. And it's a really nice, interesting look. Now, compared to the Core model, the finish is quite a bit thicker on the SE model. I seem to remember on the Core model, you could sort of start to feel a little bit of the grain, but, you know, the finish is nice on the SE model, and that dog hair look I actually really like. Swamp Ash is a classic T-type material for the body, kind of known for its snappy top end, but also a more tight low end as well, and I do think that carries over to the plugged-in tone of this guitar. Swamp Ash is also known to be quite a heavy wood, but that is not the case with this guitar. It's well balanced, it's lightweight, and more importantly, it is resonant. Let's move on to hardware and electronics. And this is an area with the SE NF53 that I think is really impressive. It doesn't feel like PRS has compromised too much in this area. The tuners feel great. I'm thinking that these are brand new tuners that are going to be across the rest of the PRS line or the PRS SE line. They're really cool, kind of like a vintage cream button, which I like actually. So yeah, the tuners feel great, the bridge is really nice and solid, and I love that they've put brass saddles on this, which is personally a mod or something I do to all of my T-types. If I had to nitpick, maybe the nut is a slightly cheaper material than would be on a more expensive guitar, but kind of that's obvious. And you know what? It's perfectly functional and it works just fine. Onto the electronics, they've stuck with that simple three-way switch and volume and tone. Nothing crazy fancy here. And personally, I love that. I know some people are going to wish they added a push-pull for something or a five-way blade. Personally, this is the route. This is what a T-type, whether this is a T-type or not, should feel like. I'll also say that the electronics feel really good and really solid in the hand. It feels like they've used good quality pots, especially the switch feels really positive. I'm also a fan of these kind of clear speed knobs that they've used on this guitar. You see this on some of the more expensive guitars. I like that this is kind of trickled down onto the SE model as well. Nice knobs. The pickguard is probably the most obvious visual difference between the SE and the Core model. It's a slightly bigger design with a bit more of a pawn shop vibe, shall we say. I think you're either going to love it or hate it. Personally, I don't mind it. I'm just not a big fan of this cut around the pickup, but I know why they've done it, probably because it is more cost effective to mount a pickup to a pickguard rather than to the body. So I think that trade-off is kind of worth it for the overall price of this guitar. And you know what? It's a nice visual difference compared to the Core model. They had to distinguish it in some way. I'm sure some of you are waiting for me to talk about the pickups because they're a big part of this guitar's identity. And I guess the question is, are they single coils? Are they humbuckers? Kind of both, actually. These are PRS narrow field DD-S pickups. DD stands for deep dish, meaning they've got slightly taller bobbins, meaning there's a few more winds on each pickup, maybe meaning they're slightly hotter or more focused. And then the S in DDS means that they are more single coil voiced. Tighter lows, snappier highs, that sort of thing. Everything we know about single coils. But technically, yes, they are humbuckers in kind of the only sense that they buck the hum. They are noise cancelling, which is actually really welcome. But tonally, they definitely sound more single coily, even leaning on P90 territory in my opinion. They are slightly more mid-forward, I would say, more focused than a vintage Tele set, but they do still have a kind of a Tele type twang too. It's just a little more tame, probably a bit more modern sounding. I feel like they're a bit more geared up to handle slightly higher gain maybe than a really vintage T-type set. I'm a big fan of this guitar. I've really enjoyed playing it just as much as the Core model, to be honest. There's things about this guitar that remind me of that guitar in my head, and this is just, it's super solid and positive feeling, really impressive from the SE line. And it reminds me of something I read about the SE Silver Sky, and it's that PRS are almost in danger of making their SE guitars too good, that they start to compete with the S2 and the Core models. Now I will say that the Core full-fat NF53 is still a step up from this guitar. Obviously it costs like nearly 3 times as much, but that gap is slightly smaller than I was expecting. Setup was also really great straight out the box, and I know this is a press guitar, or you know, whatever, they send it out to a few people, but the setup and the strings and everything was perfect straight out the box, I will say. Is it a Telecaster? No, it's not, but it's certainly inspired by. There's enough tweaks and changes to that 50 design here that make it its own thing. Can it replace a Telecaster in your rig? I would say maybe if you're out there gigging all the time, but maybe in a studio you'd probably still want to have this and a vintage T. It almost complements a Telecaster really well. I can certainly imagine having like a dual mono gig bag with this in one side and a Telecaster in the other, just to cover off different flavors. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Silver Sky is much closer to a Strat than this is to a Tele. To round this up, I'm definitely still gassing for an NF53. And my decision just got a little bit harder. The question is, do I save up and get a Core, or do I save some money and get an SE and probably still be really happy with it? Let me know what you think I should get down in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.